Geek Out! Hey, this is a special episode where we talk to Christopher Sebela and Joshua Hixson about their upcoming Image Comics series, Shanghai Red, out in comic book stores everywhere and on Comixology on Wednesday, June 20th. The final order cutoff retailers is this Monday, so definitely jump on that. It's kind of this dark period epic that follows one young woman after she's shanghaied and decides to run the oceans red with the blood of her tormentors. So it's a rip-roaring good time, but let's let them talk about it. And joining us this week, we have Chris Sebela and Josh Hixson. They're here to talk about their new Image Comics series, Shanghai Red, out in comic book stores everywhere and on Comixology on Wednesday, June 20th. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
So with this book, it's a period piece. It's high seas, swashbuckling, bloody as hell, revenge, yarn. How did this all kind of come about?
I live in Portland, Oregon, and I moved here in 2010. So after I was here for a couple of years, I started kind of exploring the history of the place. And I found out about these things called the Shanghai tunnels, it's a tourist destination here in town. And it was basically, part of this network of tunnels that ran underneath Portland, all the way to the Willamette River. And the story was that people got shanghaied here a lot, and they were locked up in the tunnels until there was somebody ready to sell them to. It just suddenly opened this door to I was like, wait, this is real? And then, just the more I read, the more it felt. I went on a tour of the Shanghai tunnels, which really sold me on it. As soon as I was down there, I was like, oh man, this would be such a good setting for a scene in a book. And when I came out of the tour, I had the idea for Shanghai Red. Then I just did a lot of research, and then started talking to Josh, and then we started making a comic.
You guys had met on online, or some of Josh's online work had caught your eye. What was it about? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot, Chris. What is it about?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, what was it, Chris?
Yeah, that really that drew you to his style. I was like, this dude can do revenge pirates.
I don't know what it was. I think it was the fact that there was some tooth to his lines. They weren't these clean, pristine lines that you see some artists draw. That just didn't feel right for the book. I don't know. As soon as I saw Josh's stuff, I was like, man, he'd be really good on this Shanghai book. Because he does stuff that takes place in the modern day. But it's got this sort of edge to it that I think separates it. And it's not. Yeah, it's hard to describe. And I think once you see the book, it'll make sense. But it just made sense the moment I saw his stuff. I was like, I couldn't think of anybody who I was going to ask to pitch with me on the book, and then I saw Josh's pages on Tumblr, and I was like, this dude would be perfect.
And then to kind of then bounce the ball in your court, Josh, you've got some very atmospheric, moody, dark visuals that you're doing here. I mean, you certainly earn the Shanghai Red title just with this debut issue. It's a blood-soaked debut. What was it about that kind of attracted you to the story as you were crafting it visually, and Chris kind of proposed it to you?
Well, I had heard of Chris, or rather his books and stuff. He was doing Dead Letters at the time, which I was really I just wanted to get a hold of it and read it. And once he messaged me, I was like, oh, I got to go out and get that book. And I went and got it, and I read it, and I was like, hell yeah, I gotta do this with him. But yeah, once he, sort of elaborated on the story a little bit and said that it was, going to be revenge, I was like, you don't even have to tell me anymore. Just the fact that it's your adventure story, like that's cool enough for me. But yeah, and then him like telling more about the story, learning more about it, I was even more on board. And then when I got the script and was like reading more about it, because like when we first started off, I didn't have like a ton of script to go off of, just sort of like a synopsis and everything, which was honestly enough. But as I got and was able to read more of like the actual story, I was just super stoked. And by that time, obviously, we were working on it and everything. But yeah, just like the more and more I got of it, the more excited I was to be a part of it.
You had kind of come from a horror background, and Chris, you've certainly done more horror tinged books, as well. What is it about? Would you call? I hate to necessarily like slap labels on something, which, having said that, I'm about to do with this question, I guess. But the would you kind of say that there are horror undertones or even overtones with Shanghai Red overall?
I mean, in a way, but it's not fantastical. I mean, it's the horror of history. We definitely take some liberties with stuff, but like we also try to not shy away from the fact that like sailors who got shanghaied were basically slaves, and were there to, they could be killed and thrown overboard and nobody would care. Like the bigger crime was if you were a sailor who like jumped ship, then you'd be like prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But if your name got forged on a signature and suddenly you were stuck on a boat for 2 years, nobody cared. So it's that sort of like Kafka-esque horror of like you're living in the world, but the world has just like turned against you. And I think more so for Red in this book, because she was basically, she started disguising herself as a man so that she could get work in the kind of stuff she wanted to do, which like liberated her, but it is also the reason that she got shanghaied. So there's definitely like, horror elements to it, but nothing fantastical. It's just, the same horrors that are going on today, basically.
Well, there's also like, just from a visual standpoint, there and within the script, there are some stuff that we haven't necessarily really seen in a period piece book. There are like these psychological, we even from Jump, and this issue or series really does hit the ground running. We start to see the psychological toll on Red, and this kind of like one woman against the world and what that kind of costs her, and just being separated from her life for years, which I think kind of lends itself really well to the story.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have some of those elements in mind when we started on it, but one, I wanted to give Josh some cool stuff to draw that wasn't like just more people walking down streets or sitting on boats. So like finding a way to visualize some of that psychological stuff for her by really kind of dialing up the horror visuals of it. It just made sense to me, and especially I think the first one I gave Josh, I was like a little uncertain about. I was like, am I taking this too far? And then I saw how Josh drew it, and I was like, no, this is perfect. Like, it doesn't look like a dream sequence. It just looks like you get lost in a moment and all your worst thoughts kind of come bubbling up.
Kind of like a Crimson Tide. The you had mentioned when this kind of first came about, you didn't necessarily have a full script ready for Josh. What's your all's creative collaborative process like?
I'll let Josh handle this one.
Well, in the beginning, it was a little more like he would give me a couple pages at a time. So I was just getting it in like piecemeal sort of thing. Again, he had sort of, this is what's going to happen in this issue. And so I had that. But, you don't know a lot about the story until you were actually reading the pages and everything. So I was getting it in small pieces when we first started. And then it kind of, picked up more and more. He would, I think he got one or no, two and three, like all at once, which was super cool. But yeah, it's just, the sort of back and forth has changed, a bit since we first started. There was a lot more, talking about like the pages when we first started off. I was kind of like timid, I guess, because this being my first book, I was like, oh, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to screw up Chris's writing. And, I was like, oh, will this be okay? Will that be all right? Like just a lot of that kind of stuff. And Chris was always like, yeah, I know, just do it. Like, do you, I trust you. It's all good. So over time that sort of like, changed a lot. And now we've kind of reached the point where, he'll give me a script and I'll just draw them to completion unless I come across anything like major or something that I feel isn't working. But I'll just draw them to completion and then send them to him and sort of give him my notes on how I change things. And usually it's not anything very significant, just, adding panels or changing beats and stuff. But yeah, it's changed a little bit over time, but overall I think it's we just kind of figured out how we both like to work and everything.
With this, I mean,
yeah. I just wanted to at least like I don't recommend writing that way, the way we were doing it initially. Writers call it chunking, where you're just sending your artist like, here's a chunk of pages, and I swear I'll get you another chunk. But it was also, we kept working on this book on and off in between paying gigs and stuff. So then it would, I'd be like, oh crap, I have to like bust out a script. So,
yeah, that was by no means me throwing Chris under the bus or anything. We were both...
no, I just wanted to tell the world, I guess, like defend myself. But I don't know. I also think it like,
yeah,
we've kind of been, sort of chunking this whole book so far is like, when we both have some room to start working on it again, then we would like come back together and, it would be like we spent, I mean, sometimes, it'd be like 4 or 5 months before we started working on another issue. Yeah. But, that I think this whole process has been like really useful for both of us figuring out what kind of book we're trying to make.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say it doesn't. I mean, it despite the chunking and the kind of like start schedule or start stop schedule, it flows beautifully. Are you doing kind of a Are you drawing on black paper, Josh, or I mean, because there's a lot of dark hues and a lot of it almost like. The moodiness that you kind of take with it almost feels like an Eisner book. It's almost like noir on the high seas to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely very influenced by noir criminal books. That's kind of my favorite stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm drawing. I don't know if that was part of your question. I pencil digitally and ink everything by hand. And yeah, I don't know. I just kind of, I like, for some reason, the more sort of shadows on the page, the more I seem to like how it comes out for some reason. I'm trying to steer away from that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it just fit the story. And that was kind of what I was doing up until that point anyway. So I figured I would try and make it fit with how I thought it should look.
Right on. Was there kind of a noir influence when you were writing? Because it does kind of like have a hard boiled feel to it, Chris. Now that I'm thinking about it, because nobody is happy in a noir book, and nobody's happy in Shanghai. I mean, rightfully so. They get like shanghaied for 3 years, but I mean, it's yeah.
There are some happy though.
Yeah. I think like Boston is pretty like. He's not great, but he's on a boat. just kind of hanging out. But yeah, I mean, I did. There's this whole thing I did before I started actively pursuing comics, which was I built a crime library. Like I bought myself a bookshelf and found a crime bookstore. This is when I was living in Kansas City, Missouri, but I found a crime bookstore like out in Kansas. So I would go there every weekend and I would buy stuff and I would just fill up the bookcase and then I read everything in it. So like a lot of that stuff like definitely kind of burned itself into my head. And just in general, I like bleak stories. Like, I don't know. I it's not that I don't have a happy story in me. It's just like, I feel like there are so many of those out there that I'm kind of more interested in at least pushing forward more of the stuff that is not hopeless, but, certainly is not like feel good all the time. Because I don't feel good all the time. So like my choice of fiction tends to lean in that direction, just naturally. So yeah, I'm trying to work on happier stuff, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Having said all that, you did get to write one of my favorite superheroes of all time. This guy really just transcends like the medium, and he's certainly got like a dedicated fan base. I'm of course talking about Space Ghost, and I was kind of wondering what that what that experience was like.
Really weird because James Tynan asked me. We had been actually talking about co-writing on Detective, and then some stuff got shuffled around. So he's like, "How about we start with this?" And I was like, "Okay." It's like one of those books that like somebody tells you is coming out, and you're like, I don't even understand how a book like that exists. And that's where I started from. So Green Lantern I was fairly familiar with. Space Ghost I only really knew through the talk show. And I knew that wasn't the vibe they wanted. So I had to go back and kind of explore the original Space Ghost, which was interesting. But once once we kind of settled on who was who in the sort of buddy cop relationship, then it was just, we were just writing like an outer space buddy cop comedy.
That's cool, man. All the shows I've done, I do like 4 or 5 comic shows a year. Jake and I kind of work alongside Image and do a lot of their stuff. I've never seen anybody cosplay as Space Ghost, and that bums me out because I've been doing this for years. And
I feel like, you'd have to get like so much like foam involved or something. Like, who has the physique to like pull off? Because it's really about the shoulders, and it's like, who has shoulders or a neck like that? Like, you'd have to have a prosthetic neck.
I've seen people cosplay Aku. If they can do Aku, Space Ghost is a feasible option.
I think you're gonna have to do it and show people
That's right.
what's possible.
Show them the way, Sam.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, I'll wear that to Heroes this year. I'll just doing all my CBR.
And that'll be the one time someone else does Space Ghost, and you guys walk in, you're like, motherfucker.
Yeah, and he'll be the better. No, with my luck, it'll be the better Space Ghost.
It'd be like a bodybuilder. He's like, oh man.
Yeah, look at this runt Space Ghost, runt Ghost.
Yeah, here's my son.
I might as well be the monkey, But
that's your backup costume.
Yeah, the something we ask everybody that kind of has this like interest in horror, and Josh, you've done the horror graphic novel and all that, and the is it Cannibalin Records that you're the artist for?
Yeah, I'm like one of their main illustrator or whatever for a lot of their album covers and stuff.
Right. Yeah, and Chris, of course, you've done quite a few John Carpenter properties, so I know that you're no stranger to the world of horror. But are you guys Team Jason, Team Michael Myers, or Team Jason Voorhees? Did I say Jason twice?
You did.
Okay. I gave him a.
Well, to be fair, it was Jason and then Jason Voorhees.
I gave him a. I gave
Could
him.
have been any Jason.
Yeah.
That was his family name. I gave him. Sorry, Freddy Krueger.
Oddly formal.
Yeah.
Mr. Esquire. But yeah, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, or
Leatherface. We've had some people drop Leatherface.
We've
on
had
us.
one person drop Pinhead too.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick to the rules. I'll go with Freddy because Freddy, at least like 3 of those movies are good. There's one good, maybe 2 good Michael Myers movies, and like all the Friday the 13th are terrible. They're just like varying levels. But like Freddy, at least like you don't know what's going to happen in those movies the first time you see them. So plus he had a scene where like he kills a dude in a comic book. So keep it real.
I'm gonna go Freddy too. I don't know. I haven't even watched all of those movies, so I can't. I'm like the wrong person to ask for this. Like I haven't seen all the Jason movies. I haven't seen all the Halloween movies. I think I've only seen 1 and 2 of Nightmare on Elm Street, and that was like within the past 4 years. So I didn't like grow up with these movies for some reason.
Oh wow! Like Dream Warriors is like the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should really watch Dream Warriors.
Okay, I'll get on that.
So what are your horror interests then?
Oh God, I guess they're more like contemporary or whatever. I'm a big fan of that movie, The Witch, that came out. That's like my horror taste. If I had to sum it up in one movie, that would probably be it.
So you're you got the period piece going on with Shanghai Red, so you kind of get to. I don't think I mean, if I'm spoiling anything, Chris, feel free to cut me off. But I'm assuming Black Phillip doesn't make an appearance.
No, I wish.
I still got to do issue 5, so maybe I'll sneak him in there somewhere.
Oh, you should. I'm totally on board for that. Like,
Okay, I'll do that somehow.
all right, good.
Speaking of goats, that's the worst segue I've done in the history of the. Are we going to start to see more of Red's past and kind of the road to the? I mean, it's almost like she has the worst Oregon Trail experience ever because she makes it out to Portland and then she gets like kidnapped by pirates for years. But yeah, are we going to kind of see more of her past and maybe more of Boston's past too?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely Red's story. So, like I have a story in my head about Boston. But he's definitely like not like it's her and sort of her family is what I'm mainly focused on. So, and yeah, I mean, we get a little bit more into her past, sort of more her recent past. I don't know. Like, yeah, I can't think of a way to approach it without really just saying like, well, here's what happens. So yeah, I mean, for this book, like the most important part of the book is Red and her character, like, and getting myself to a place where like she is a real person to me to some degree. And then it takes a lot of the work out of the work because then I don't have to figure out like what would she do. And it's like now by this point, it's like we've known each other for a couple of years. So now I know like what she would do in this scenario or that scenario. So I'm just trying to get her to the ending, and sort of, I make it a worthy journey, like not just from a blood and explosions perspective, which it is on that level, but also just like a satisfying kind of emotional journey for her.
Speaking of kind of the, would you say if this gives the game away too much, I mean, I totally understand, but would you say the big overarching themes of the series are both revenge and just how far someone will go to get to their family to make up for that lost time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it is about family and sort of the family that you're stuck with and the ones that you want to have as your family. And a lot of it's about identity. It's about Red trying to figure out who she is really, because she's been living, as Jack, this like man that she invented, who she disguised herself as in order to get work, and also just as a way to like get her family to Portland without all of them dying. And then she's been like trapped as him, and now, like there's a part of her that really likes being him, and there's a part of her that sort of blames him for everything that's happened. So it's a lot about like her trying to sort of sort out exactly who she is now, because she's been forced to live one way and then another way, and now the moment she kills everybody on the boat, like she has absolute freedom, and it's what she does with that when you don't have any rules on your head telling you have to be this way or that way.
So Jack is essentially both simultaneously her guilt and her empowerment personified.
Yeah, and sort of, that's a good way of putting it. And, I'm trying to explore, like, her living with that and, to a much lesser degree, like, gender issues of, like, which is about, I don't know, like, this all becomes very complicated and stuff, but, I just wanted to do a book about somebody who just like wasn't quite sure who they were, and sometimes the easier thing to do when you're faced with like big scary questions is to like hit something instead. So there's this like symbiotic relationship where like she's going so hard at this revenge stuff, I think, to a degree, because there's a lot about herself she doesn't want to deal with, especially in the aftermath of like surviving this horrible thing. I'm making it sound very like touchy-feely, which it is at times, but it's also very actiony, and and it's very historically driven. Like I did my best to like stick to actual Portland history and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like weird intrigue, and I don't know. It's an interesting time period to me because it's not the Old West, but cars aren't around, stuff like that. So I just think like all of this stuff together, like we're doing a book that there's just not really out there. And Josh and I talked about that when Image was asking us like, tell us some other comics it's like, and I think we both like decided we were like, it's kind of like no comics out there right now. So yeah, which is a bit full of ourselves, but honestly, like that's how we feel about it.
Well, in a weird way, between all the revenge-driven swashbuckling, it's kind of like the most touching moment, without going into specifics for our listeners at home, is this like, in a weird way, that there's the most emotional moment is like this love letter to Portland, despite all the bloodletting and backstabbing and people getting thrown to the sharks. Like it's like the most touching moment in the entire book. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of those more nods to, or is Portland the home that she can never go back to?
Yeah, you got to read the book.
That's fair. Now something we ask everybody that comes on the show: what are you guys currently geeking out over?
I literally have Zelda on the TV right now. So
Breath of the Wild.
I just got a Switch like a month or two ago. Mm-hmm. So I've just been playing this nonstop ever since when I can. But I just don't have the time to fully dedicate to it. So I'm still like, I'm not even like halfway through it. But so there's that. And then I can't, I'm trying to think of anything that's really like blowing my mind lately. Let me think about it and I'll kick it over to Josh.
Again, I'm probably the wrong person to be asking this. I don't know because I haven't done anything or got anything new that I'm like freaking out over. I did see Infinity War and I really liked that, which I kind of was not. I didn't have high hopes for that for some reason, and it kind of blew me. Yeah, I don't know. I really liked it, but that's about it, which is really kind of boring.
No music lately?
Music? Oh God, no. I got the Weeknd's new EP and the Killer's new album recently, which I've been listening to a lot.
I do like. Was it "Run for Cover" is the latest single off that record?
Probably. I don't know what all the singles are. I just know their first one. But yeah, that whole album is great. I love the Killers.
Chris.
Yeah, I like that new Childish Gambino song. That's really good.
Nice.
Oh yeah. That's
Yeah, mostly I've just been listening to. I make playlists for books, so which are just like mixtapes to myself. So I've been listening to those a lot because I've been kind of deep in the weeds. But I can't think of anything that like is sort of new and exciting. There's a new Courtney Barnett album coming out like in a month, I think.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be new. Like, Let It Be just turned 48 yesterday.
There was the guy that was geeking out over milk plastic. That's not new.
Yeah, we had a guy that what's his name? Steve Saunders that did Throwaways with Caitlin Kittredge makes milk plastic.
Oh yeah, no, I know Steve very well. That's probably the least weird thing he could tell you. Yeah, there was when I first met Steve, like on Friday nights, he and a friend of his, like they'd get like speed, and they would do this like speed, and then they would like modify Star Wars figures.
Oh. Okay.
Allegedly. I'm going to put allegedly because I'm probably screwing up some details, but like that was like the first.
It was actually Star Trek figures.
Yes. Everything else is true,
Yeah.
but it's just Star Trek.
And it was always Worf.
We got to add more ridges.
No, I've been I don't know. I've been really geeking out about like cleaning up my house lately. Which is sad, but I've also I've been kind of like in stasis for the last year, so I bought curtains.
Right.
I got an LED light for my toilet, which is pretty unnecessary, but also glad I have it. So I guess I've been nesting a little bit. I've been like trying to like not live in a shithole. Can I say shithole?
You can say whatever the fuck you want, man.
Right.
I've been in my apartment for about a year and a half, and I still don't have all my wall art up. I still have boxes of stuff in closets that I should probably take out.
I mean, if you want to feel better about yourself, I've lived in this
No,
house.
I feel great.
Well, I know I'm talking to Sam right now, but
Okay.
I've lived in this house for about 15 years, give or take, and I still have things in boxes from when I moved here.
What?
Yeah, I just discovered I had a Ghost Rider action figure I bought like 3 years ago in my trunk. I was like, fuck yeah.
You got to do, Chris, didn't you get to do, was it Damnation Ghost Rider?
Yeah, Johnny Blaze one shot.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. No pun intended, Jake?
No pun intended.
Or maybe all puns intended, because
That's true.
I mean,
You
that
messing with
character
Johnny
is
Blaze.
like the best. It's like Space Ghost is cool and all. He's like yoked like a motherfucker, but Johnny Blaze is a flaming skeleton on a motorcycle in leather and chains.
Yeah, who was this like stuntman before he was all that?
Yeah. That's just like the coolest thing.
It was pretty dope. And they kind of just let me, like when they asked me to do it, they were like, okay, here's the surrounding story. What you have to do is you have to get Johnny Blaze to take over hell in 20 pages. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they just kind of let me do, like, I pitched them my story, and they're like, yeah, it sounds cool. And I was like, well, there will be a flaming, like, elephant man. And they were like, yeah, that's fine. So,
Oh, that's great.
How much did the Nick Cage movies influence that book, Chris?
Only the second one.
Oh yeah.
The
There's,
superior, of course.
The only thing I remember about the second one is like he gets on like some weird like buzzsaw machine, like a tree cutting machine, and then turns it into a flaming tree cutting machine.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I literally remember nothing else about that movie.
He pisses fire in a black box theater.
Yeah. And then when he shows up for the first time, there's that great moment where it's like, oh, it's like, 'cause they update the design a little bit from the first one, so he's like all like charbroiled and like all kinds of fucked up. And then like he stands there for what feels like 15 minutes while the bad guys just stare at him as he just rocks back and forth. And it's just like they let the camera just roll, and Nick Cage did whatever he wanted. That was the movie where he showed up unannounced with corpse paint and like LED lights around his neck, so he could feel like Ghost Rider. Like Google search that. It's kind of amazing.
Not know any of this.
Yeah. I do love the moment in the first one where he's like flipping off the cops as he's like revving up the motorcycle and like driving up the side of a skyscraper and
Glass
stuff.
skyscraper.
Yeah. There's some cool stuff, but like again, I don't think any franchise, the two movies have ever
technically Man-Thing's a franchise.
have ever forgotten their own continuity more than those two Ghost Rider movies. They refer to scenes in the first movie that never happened in the second one, or they get information wrong. So hopefully Johnny shows up somewhere down the line, because he's just
in Shanghai Red.
He's exactly
I'm sure Marvel's totally cool with that.
Just like Ghost Rider popping around.
It'll just slowly turn into a Ghost Rider book.
A flaming ghost ship, guys.
Surprise!
No, don't worry. It's just an homage to the movie Drive Angry.
Yeah.
The best Ghost Rider movie they've ever made.
Well, on that note, so Shanghai. So, anything else you guys want to plug before we return you to the wilds of Portland and other parts of the country?
I have another book coming out from Image in August called Crowded, which is a sort of like action comedy odyssey book about a future where there's a Kickstarter for assassinations. So yeah, that's my plug. Buy that too.
Josh?
I wish I did, but as of right now, Shanghai's pretty much taken up most of my time. I'll be in Heroes, or I'll be at Heroes next month, so if anyone lives around or plans to go there, I'll be there. So
I think I'm doing press there for CBR, so
Sam will be there as Space Ghost.
come by.
Yeah.
Look for something.
Yeah, look for the Pacific Islander Space Ghost, and that's.
I will also be at Heroes.
Oh, cool!
Yeah.
Two guys,
And also dressed as Space Ghost.
Yes,
the superior
I'll
Space
be the
Ghost.
one who outdoes you. Yeah.
It's a low bar on my part.
He's
really.
chosen to do Eastern European Space Ghost.
He's Portlandia Space Ghost, which I feel like is already Space Ghost coast to coast.
Yeah.
Yeah. just
Because
with
which
the
Portland is it?
beard.
Whoa.
But again, June 20th, out in comic book stores everywhere. Shanghai Red. Chris, Josh, thanks for coming on and experiencing our particular brand of madness.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.